This is the ER channel, Empires and Revolution. In the course of the 20th century, America has fought 3 major wars against East Asian countries. The first was that against Japan in World War II. The second, the Korean War, in which the Chinese also participated. And the final one was the Vietnam War. Of these 3 conflicts, America has only managed to win one, while drawing and losing the other 2. Many reasons could be given for these various results. But taking a macro-empirical view of the situation, the pattern is quite clear. A win, followed by a draw, followed by a defeat, followed by a long period when America has avoided any conflict in East Asia. Yes, quite an obvious downward trajectory. From this, one might conclude that America is an empire or nation in decline, less able to fight important military struggles. There is certainly some truth in that. But why was America in the 1960s unable to defeat Vietnam, and in the 1950s unable to defeat Korea, but was able in the 1940s to defeat Japan? One obvious reason is that America had more allies in the first of those wars, and even some allies in the second of those wars, but in the third of those wars it was largely fighting on its own, with only token support from a few other countries like Australia. But another reason for America's differential results in those 3 wars is connected to its trump card, namely nuclear weapons. Although America had the atomic bomb in all 3 wars, they were only able to use it effectively in the first of those wars, namely against Japan. General MacArthur threatened to use it in the second of those wars, but he was quickly dropped by his government. While in the third of those wars, the one against Vietnam, the option of using nuclear weapons was never seriously discussed. Again, there is a plausible but rather unsatisfying reason for this, namely that America in 1945 was the only power to possess nuclear weapons. In the 1950s, Russia had just acquired nuclear weapons, while by the 1960s, not only had China also acquired nuclear weapons, but Russia had greatly increased its nuclear arsenal. So the plausible reason is that America increasingly feared using nuclear weapons because of the danger of retaliation. But I think there is an additional reason why America could use nuclear weapons against Japan, but couldn't use them against Korea, China, and Vietnam. And it was this reason that allowed someone like Chairman Mao to call America a paper tiger in one of his most famous quotes. And that reason is a moral one. In 1945, Japan was completely isolated from the rest of the international community. It was the final Axis power still fighting the war. This is a contrast with North Korea in the 1950s, which was supported by the communist bloc, representing a very large part of the world, and also implicitly supported by a lot of the emerging non-aligned world. Countries like India and Indonesia and various other emerging third world countries. This was also the case with North Vietnam. The North Vietnamese enjoyed the support, tacit or explicit, of the entire Soviet bloc. There were also a lot more non-aligned third world countries that were at least partly sympathetic to North Vietnam. And in addition to that, there were considerable segments of American society that were sympathetic to North Vietnam, leftists and liberals of various descriptions. But not only was Japan extremely isolated in 1945 from the rest of the international community, it was also tarnished, deeply morally tarnished, by its association with Nazi Germany. Hitler, in World War II, had created a template of total war. The actions of the German military had been entirely ruthless and had been reciprocated by the Allies. German civilian bombings had led to 1,000-bomber raids on Germany itself. The extermination of populations like the Jews, like the Gypsies, like the mentally deficient, the horrors that were revealed by the advancing Allied armies, many of which were in fact caused by starvation and blockade, all this created a negative moral charge that allowed whoever was fighting Germany and anyone associated with Germany to use the utmost methods of violence to achieve victory. It was this moral dimension, this negative moral dimension, I should say, that allowed America to unleash a nuclear hell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Without Hitler, without Japan's association with Nazi Germany, and without the extreme violence associated with Nazi Germany, it would have been a lot more difficult for America to have destroyed the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. Chairman Mao, a very astute leader of his country, and not a particularly moral one, whose rule led to the deaths of tens of millions of his own people, nevertheless understood morality as an aspect of warfare. And he realized that America, despite its military hardware and its occasional bluster, was in no position morally to do to China what it had done to Japan, which is why he coined the phrase, America is a paper tiger.